So we make a start.
Let's.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Lovely to see you, Frank. So, I'd like to start tonight by wishing you all a very happy new year, Year of the Rabbit, and hope that this year for all of you will be a much better year than last year was, and certainly the year before, and that you have good health and peace of heart and mind throughout the year, and that you really flower and prosper during this year. Before starting tonight, I wanted to remind you of the little teaching that the Buddha gave in the Anguttara Nikaya, in which he says to Ananda, it's not easy to teach the Dhamma. It's not easy to teach the Dhamma. The Dhamma should be taught to others only when 5 qualities are established within the person who is teaching. So this is a very interesting little teaching given by the Buddha, because these days all sorts of people all over the world are saying that they're teaching Dhamma, or they're teaching the teaching of the Buddha. And I get daily, I don't know what you'd call them, sort of notes or messages from Tricycle magazine. And I'd have to say to you that that very often I look at them and think that they're so prosaic and so inane, and so without any depth, that it really worries me that people are teaching all sorts of things. So here's the Buddha himself saying it's not easy to teach the Dhamma. And he says, the Dhamma should be taught with the thought, I will speak slowly, step by step. And this implies, of course, that I will think carefully and consider carefully what I'm going to say, because this is for the person who's doing the teaching or supposed to be teaching, that I'll have this thought in mind, or this will flavor my teaching, that I'll speak gradually or I'll teach step by step. So I don't just jump in and start teaching something that I think is interesting, but may be far too difficult. And I'm sure we've all had the experience of, say, picking up a Dhamma book of one kind or another and reading it and thinking, oh, I'm not sure what this is talking about really. Someone just rang me the other day and said exactly that, about a book that I gave to them quite some years ago now. And they said to me, oh, Bhante, I just reread that book you gave me and I finally get it. But that's not surprising. That's what happens, you know, when we read something and perhaps we're not ready for it, or we haven't had enough experience of Dhamma in a particular expression. And so it's important, the Buddha says, to speak or teach Dhamma step by step or gradually. And then he says, I will speak explaining the sequence of cause and effect. So I have to think very carefully so that I can explain, if I'm teaching Dhamma, okay, here's the cause, here's the effect. If this is, then this arises. And not just blurt things out or repeat formulae, which is very easy to do. And I'm not knocking Tricycle, but very often the stuff that appears on those daily, so-called daily reflections is nothing but repeating formulae. The next one is terribly important. I will teach out of compassion. So there's your motivation in teaching. I will teach out of compassion. So it's not that, I'll teach because I want to teach. I had someone tell me that once when I said to them, this was an ordained Sangha person who should never have been allowed to teach anybody because they hadn't even taught themselves. And I said to this person, really, you should not be teaching. And this person said, oh, yes, but I want to. Well, that's not the reason to be teaching. The Buddha says, I will teach out of compassion, not because I want to, or because, I want to construct a particular reputation for myself or something like that. I always remember many, many years ago teaching with Sogyal Rinpoche in Melbourne. And all of you, I'm sure, would be aware of the disgrace that befell Sogyal Rinpoche. And at the time, I remember thinking, there's something wrong with the way that this man is presenting the Dhamma, because it's all about him. It's not about the Dhamma. It's all about some kind of image of himself. And the icing on the cake was when a young fellow in the audience asked a question, and it was very plain that this young fellow was somehow a little bit mentally deficient or disabled. And this teacher absolutely humiliated this person asking the question. And I remember thinking to myself, that's it, as far as I'm concerned. You've just burnt any connection that I might have with you. So no compassion at all. And I don't mind telling you that, because he's now been disgraced and he's since passed away. And even the Dalai Lama has kind of cut off the connection that he had with him, because he didn't teach out of compassion. He taught out of something else. Then the next one, the Buddha says, I will teach not for the purpose of material reward. And this one is terribly important as well. And I'll illustrate why with another little story. I think most of you know that Megan worked for many, many years at the hospice, up at Sacred Heart Hospice in Darlinghurst, and she's now at the Calvary Hospice. But for many, many years, she was at the hospice, and she was doing bereavement services. And I went to the hospice. I used to go very often, several times a week. And on this particular occasion, I was visiting somebody. And as I left, I went past someone else's room, and they called out, oh, can you come in here, please? And I went in, and this person said, do you teach meditation? And I said, yes. And then this lady said, do you think you could teach me? And I said, well, I'd be happy to try. And she said, well, how much will it cost? And I said, nothing. It won't cost anything. And then she told me something that really horrified me. She said, oh, I contacted a particular teacher, and she named this teacher, who was not a monastic. And she said, he told me that he would come and teach me meditation for $50. And if that was too much, he would send one of his students for $40. And I have to tell you, I was absolutely horrified. And I said to her, forget all about all of that. And I'll come in and see you a couple of times a week, and we'll do practice together and so on. And that lady this is a long time ago now, but she's since become quite a good friend, and is very supportive of the association and Sangha Lodge. So the Buddha says, I will teach not for the purpose of material reward. So not for money, not for gifts, not for anything else, just teaching out of compassion. And then the last one, the Buddha says, I will teach not hurting myself or others. And I go back to that incident with Sogyal Rinpoche, where he really destroyed that person in the talk with his terrible sharp tongue and humiliating the person. And of course, if you do that, of course, you actually do hurt yourself as well. Yeah, you make yourself ugly. So I'd like you to think about those things. When the Buddha says, it's not easy to teach the Dhamma to others. The Dhamma should be taught to others when these 5 qualities are established within oneself. And I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind. And also, it's a good thing to strive for within ourselves. When we study the Dhamma, when we try to practice the Dhamma, we can ask ourselves, am I doing this step by step? Or am I like someone I remember a long time ago who came to talk to me about their meditation practice, and I suggested something, and they said, "Oh no, Bhante, it's look, I'm that far away from enlightenment," holding his fingers up and making a sort of a 1 centimeter gap between his thumb and forefinger. I'm that far away from enlightenment. And I said, well, that's great if that's the case, and if that is the case, I can't help you at all. So step by step, thinking about the cause and effect in everything we do, in the way that we think and so on, what it leads to. And really the central one, I will speak out of compassion. So when we study and practice the Dhamma ourselves, it should be, if you like, the engine for it should be compassion. Compassion for ourselves, compassion for others. And not to be looking for material rewards of any kind. And I'd include in that things like, the Buddha's always talking about praise and blame, and we all like praise, and we don't like blame, but not to be teaching or looking for praise either. And finally, when we study and practice the Dhamma, not to harm ourselves or harm others. And we can harm others sometimes if we're too extreme in our approach to the Dhamma. I think I told you about someone that I knew many years ago, when I was living in a shared house in Newtown. This is a very long time ago. And there were a group of us, and one of the fellows in there was trying to learn levitation. And he used to practice by bouncing up and down on his bed. And one night while we were watching television, he had an old iron bed, and the leg of the bed came crashing through the ceiling. And the lady who owned the house, who was a friend, said, "That's it. Meditation or not, he's going." So he was not only harming himself, but harming others and harming the house. So having said all of that, tomorrow is the funeral for Pauline Wilkes. And I've been thinking a lot about Pauline this week. And the thing that comes to mind with Pauline, she could really qualify for teaching the Dhamma in the way the Buddha's talking about. But the thing that comes to mind with Pauline is her incredible generosity, her great capacity for dana. Sadly, in the Buddhist tradition, particularly among some monastics, dana somehow gets confused with giving money. People are talking, oh, give dana, give dana, give dana. Whereas for the Buddha, dana is not primarily about giving money. And Pauline, to me, was a great example of someone who practiced dana in a very unassuming, a very humble way. And she did it in very simple ways, very understated ways. But when we were at Sangha Lodge, she used to come every Saturday or very early on a Sunday, but more often than not on a Saturday. And she would travel by public transport to the flower markets at Flemington. And she would buy flowers, usually very beautiful flowers. And she would then come to Sangha Lodge and she would clean the shrine at Sangha Lodge and then arrange the flowers. And she had a real gift, a real talent for arranging the flowers. And she would make very beautiful arrangement in front of the Buddha image. And you could see by the way that she did it, that this was a kind of an offering to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And in this case, the Sangha meant all of us at Sangha Lodge who would be there on the Dana Day. And people used to comment all the time about how beautiful these flowers were. And then Pauline would get the bus and go back home. And very, very often I would say to her, Pauline, let me reimburse you for the flowers. And she would always say, no. Then I'd say to her, Pauline, because she was not young, and I'd say, Pauline, let me drive you home. No, she'd say. I'm perfectly capable of getting the bus. And so off she would go. Or she'd spend some time at Dana Day, of course, because she loved getting together with everybody and having a chat and having something to eat. But she really was a remarkable example of dana that didn't really draw attention to itself, that wasn't trying to get anything out of it, but just a great generosity of spirit. I mean, really, you know, when the Buddha teaches in those early narratives, we're told that the Buddha always started, when he went to a village or a town, he always started his Dhamma talks by talking about how important and what a wonderful thing dana is. And that's very interesting. He didn't go in and start talking about dukkha. You know, he didn't go in and start talking about, oh, how, you know, what a problem the body is and desire and all these other things. He didn't go in and talk about meditation practice. He talked about dana and the importance, the centrality of dana. And why? Because dana, in the first instance, is an opening up of the heart, an opening of the heart to others, an act of generosity, of giving of oneself to others. And that's really crucial, the idea of opening the heart and giving oneself to others. So just buying things for people, just giving money and so on, that's not dana in the Buddhist sense, according to the teaching of the Buddha. It could be if it's done with that open-hearted quality and thinking about the other person, you know, thinking about what would be good for them, how this will benefit them, how this could be a blessing for them. So dana then can be something which involves time, your time, giving of your time. You know, one of the problems we always had at Sangha Lodge was we'd have a small number of people who would come to do cleaning because everyone else was too busy. Everyone else was always, oh no, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, I've got to do something else. You know? Haven't got time to come and even spend half an hour helping with cleaning. So we would have the same people turn up over and over and over, right? And work very, very hard and very carefully and very diligently, and with a lot of fun as well. But you know, people and their time. Some people can be, in the words of the Buddha, some people can be very mean with their time. Yeah. Oh no, I haven't got time. Just too busy. You know? Those of you who have some kind of Christian background might remember there's a wonderful story in the New Testament about the wedding feast, when they're preparing the big wedding party and they send out the invitations and several of the guests, oh no, I can't come, I'm too busy. You know, one of them says, oh, I've just bought an ox, so I can't come to the wedding. So the Buddha says, you know, when it comes to time, that's a good indicator of your attitude to dana. Also, the Buddha talks about making the right kind of effort when it comes to dana. I've over many, many years now, some 40 years, I've known some people who make a great effort when it comes to dana, either with their time or with their intention, or what they offer, and other people who don't make any effort but just write a check. Say, oh yeah, here you go, Bhante, get this sorted out. I'll tell you another little story. When I was living with my teacher in Thailand, our monastery was very run down. Some of the Sangha Lodge people had visited it, and my teacher's kuti, which was very large because he was the abbot and the teacher, but it was in a bad state of disrepair. The shutters on the windows, there was no glass. The shutters on the windows were kind of hanging off on their hinges. The floor in his sort of reception room in front of where he slept had great big holes in it, and it was on the first floor, so he could have easily fallen through. But he didn't worry about that sort of thing. Any money that came in, he gave away to people. Anyway, one day we were sitting there and we'd just finished our 11 o'clock meal. And in came this man, very, very wealthy, one of the wealthiest people in the province where we were. And he came in and he was very ostentatious in the way that he greeted my teacher. And my teacher said, what can I do for you? I can't remember this man's name now. And the man said, oh, I've just bought, he bought this huge piece of land in the middle of the town, which is now a huge tourist resort. Yeah, I've just bought this piece of land and I want you to come and do the blessing when we turn the earth over for the first time. Funnily enough, the piece of land he bought had been a notorious nightclub, but he'd bought the land and demolished the nightclub, and he was going to build a massive hotel on it. And my teacher said, oh yes, well, when is this? And he told him the date. And as soon as he said it, I remembered that my teacher had arranged to go to, in those days, this town, which is now a very important tourist resort in Thailand. This town had a slum on the edge of the town, like a real slum. And my teacher had agreed to go and conduct a puja, a ceremony for a very poor family whose daughter had died. And he said to this man, oh, look, I'd really love to do this for you, but I can't on that day. And this man looked around and he said, oh, but you've got lots of monks here, send them. And my teacher said, no, I've already arranged with these people on that day. And then the man said, oh, well, but the Chaukana Ampur, that's the second highest monk in the province, he's going. And my teacher said, well, that's really good, but I can't go. And then the man looked around the room that we were in, and he said, oh, I could really make a big difference to this monastery. I could get all these repairs done and all sorts of things. And my teacher said, well, that would be very nice, but I still can't go. And then my teacher said, look, why don't you just choose a different day? And I'd happily come. And the man very foolishly said, oh, no, I can't choose a different day because the Mordu, that is like a witch doctor, right? Said that that's the most auspicious day and time. And my teacher looked at me with a slightly wicked grin and said to the man, well, if the Mordu said that's the most auspicious time and day, it won't make any difference whether I'm there or not. And so the man left. So there was an example of someone appearing towards the end, offering dana, which he never ever did, but with a completely wrong intention and wrong effort involved in it, and certainly not giving freely. So this question of dana, I think, is very, very important, and the Buddha has a lot to say about it. But he makes it even simpler in a way. In the Itivuddhika, and I'll just read this to you because it's a wonderful passage. He says, if beings knew, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they would not eat without having given, not would the stain of miserliness overcome their minds. Even if it were their last bite, their last mouthful, they would not eat without having shared. If there were someone to receive their gift. But because beings do not know, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they eat without having given. The stain of miserliness overcomes their minds. I think that's a very interesting teaching, to think about even simple things like when we're taking meals and so on, to think about others. You know, in the Mahayana tradition, they have a fairly long and elaborate prayer which is recited before they consume the food, and they make an offering of the food. And there's a wonderful little gesture where they take a grain of rice and they flick it into the air for the hungry ghosts, sharing their meal with departed beings. So the Buddha says, you know, this question of dana, it starts with the simplest things, with things that we do every single day. So I think it's really worth asking yourself, you know, what's your own attitude to dana, to this question of generosity, of giving to others? In the suttas, the Buddha is talking about this very, very often, but he doesn't talk about it in terms of money. He talks about what are the rewards of practicing dana, of being generous with other people. And he lists them, and he says, one is dear, precious, and appealing to people. So the generous person is somebody that people appreciate. The person who practices dana, and dana, of course, in that good way, is admired by good people. Maybe not so good people would think, oh, what a fool, you know, giving all these things away, or always offering to volunteering for something, helping other people, and so on. The Buddha then says, your good name is spread about. That is, people will talk about you in a good way. So, oh, that person's, you know, she's very kind and she's very generous and a very good-hearted person, you know. And then the Buddha says, and you don't stray from your rightful duties. Yeah. So whatever your duties are according to your state or your condition in life, you don't stray from those. And then finally he says, and with the breakup of the body, you appear in a good destination. So these are, put in simple words, these are some of the benefits or rewards of practicing dana in a really good way. In another passage, he says, a giver of what is a giver of strength, a giver of what is a giver of beauty, a giver of what is a giver of ease, a giver of what is a giver of vision, a giver, and who is a giver of everything. And the Buddha then says, the giver of food is a giver of strength. The giver of clothes is a giver of beauty. The giver of a vehicle is a giver of ease. The giver of a lamp is a giver of vision. And the one who gives a residence is the one who's a giver of everything, but the one who teaches Dhamma is a giver of the deathless. So there's an awful lot in the teaching of the Buddha. You'll find it in the Dhammapada. You'll find it scattered through all of the suttas. The Buddha's teaching on the importance, the centrality of dana. So Pauline, to me, really demonstrated or illustrated this. So the Buddha also then talks about the two kinds of dana. Yeah, he says there are these two kinds of dana. There's a gift of material things, and there's a gift of Dhamma itself. Of the two, the Buddha says, the supreme is the gift of Dhamma. There are two kinds of sharing of material things and a sharing of the Dhamma. Of the two, the sharing of the Dhamma is the supreme one. There are two kinds of assistance with material things and assistance with the Dhamma. Of the two, this is supreme, helping with the Dhamma. So we can talk about Dhamma dana, giving of the Dhamma to others, and we can do this every single day. And indeed, the Buddha also, advocates that we do it for ourselves. We give ourselves the gift of Dhamma. Yeah? Not just, I'll give Dhamma to this person or that person. No, we do it for ourselves. And also the kinds of sharing and the kinds of assistance we do for others, but we also do them for ourselves. For example, we assist ourselves when we try to practice the virtues ourselves. I think it was Mahatma Gandhi once, somebody said to him, how come you're always doing all these things for people? You're always trying to help people. And apparently he was said to have replied, oh, no, I do it for myself. Meaning that he realized that by behaving in this way, by practicing this kind of generosity or this kind of dana, he was actually benefiting himself. Not that it doesn't benefit others, but it's also a blessing for ourselves if we practice in this way. So maybe you could also think about, okay, how can I practice dana with regard to material things? And there can also be dana, I should say, we call it abhaya dana, which means that I protect other people. And I often think about this with regard to refugees. We can practice Dhamma by trying to, help and protect refugees. Some of you will know that the association has, for a long time now, been involved in the refugee centre in Newtown, providing food and also collecting food and other things that they need for those people who are refugees, who need help. This is a good example of abhaya dana, that is providing fearlessness or comfort for people who are in distress. And then, of course, that can lead to the gift of Dhamma itself when people start to think, oh, why are these people doing this? What is it that motivates these people? Where is this coming from? And maybe they'll see a little of the Dhamma in the actions that are performed by the people doing these things, which are very good, very useful, very beneficial, and protecting people. Of course, you don't have to be a Buddhist to do this. If you think about the war in Ukraine at the moment, the way that, for example, in Poland, the way people have behaved is absolutely extraordinary. The way they've taken in refugees and gone to great lengths to look after them, to feed them, to clothe them, to send the children to schools. This is also dana. And this also reveals the Dhamma at a very deep level. It's also an illustration of selflessness, of letting go of self and thinking of the other. And again, I come back to that idea of opening the heart to other people. It's so important. And it should be the place where we start when we when we want to begin to really, really practice Dhamma. I remember when I first met my teacher, that was the thing that most struck me about him, was his openness, his open-heartedness and his kindness. You know, I'd met lots of monks who were just full of themselves and their own self-importance. You know, oh, come and meet this one or that one, and there they were sitting on a cushion like the king of Thailand. And then I met him, and he was extraordinarily ordinary. And he said, oh, come and have a cup of tea, sit down, let's chat. You know, there was no, oh, you know, I'm a terribly important person, I'm very busy, I haven't got time, you know. No, it was just, yeah, let's sit down and let's talk. And the second thing, of course, I've told you before, that I discovered with him was his wonderful sense of humor about himself and about me. About me, he had plenty to laugh at, but he also laughed at himself as well. So there's a lot to think about in this area of dana. I also remember a wonderful little incident with a great friend of mine who since died. And he came several times to visit me at the monastery in Australia, in Thailand, sorry. He was from Australia. And on one occasion, he said to me, you know, I'd really like to give something to the monks. And I said, oh yeah, what would you like to do? He said, oh, I don't know. And I said, well, the traditional thing is you give what's called sankirtan. You give a collection of little things that are supposed to be useful to monks. And he said, oh yes, but what? I said, look, I'll take you down into the town and we'll go to one of the monk shops and you can buy a bucket, a bucket filled up with all sorts of things that are supposed to be useful to monks. And so we did. We went downtown and we got, he chose a bucket. And we went back, and then on the way back, he said, well, oh, gee, who should I give this to? And I said, look, why don't you give it to the first monk you see when you walk back in? Oh, okay, he said. And I said, that way, it's, you know, you're not sort of choosing a monk that you particularly like or anything else. Oh, yes, good idea, he said. And when we walked in, there sitting under a tree outside his kuti was a monk who became a great friend of mine, but he was a complete case, called Pratim. And Pratim, he's a very good person, but he was rather crude and vulgar. And he was sitting under the tree on a seat, swinging his legs backwards and forwards and having a cigarette. And my friend said, oh, should I give it to him? I said, well, you agreed you'd give it to the first monk you saw. And so he went over, and I'd already told him how to offer the thing and how to kneel and so on. And so he did all of that, and he handed the bucket to Pratim, who didn't draw breath. He just kept talking and put the bucket down on the ground and completely ignored it. And I could see from the look on my friend's face, it was like, but he didn't say thank you. He didn't even look at it, you know. And then afterwards, when we talked about it, I said, well, part of that with Tim is just plain rudeness. But also remember, you're supposed to do these things in a detached manner. And so I said, really, you know, what you did and the way you did it was very, very good. You know? So we shouldn't expect, you know, because we do something for others that they're going to jump up and down and tell us how good we are and how wonderful we are, or give us things. We should just try to be generous all the time, really, as often as we possibly can, with what we have. And the first thing we have is our own heart. Second thing we have is our bodies. And the third thing we have is that time. And so, you know, we need to use those things and develop our, develop our quality of dana and generosity in that way. So let's finish this off and do a little bit of practice. We need, of course, to practice dana often. And so we need to be on the lookout for instances or moments when we can practice dana. Can I be a little bit more generous with my time? Can I be a little bit more generous with my resources? And so on. Now, of course, you have to be sensible about this as well. You don't want to become, you don't want to become one of these people who's rushing around annoying the living daylights out of people being good. Because that doesn't do anyone any good. Doesn't do the other person any good, except to annoy them. Although Shantidewa says it's great to have a friend who does that, who annoys you, who annoys the living daylights out of you, because he says it's perfect opportunity to practice patience. But you should be on the lookout for opportunities. Okay, how can I practice dana in this way or that way? How can I, for example, protect someone or look after someone? It doesn't mean, I rush out and, like St. Francis, and take all my clothes off and run around like that. It just means that I do the best I can given my circumstances and my situation. So I'd really like you to think about dana. I think we should do a little bit of meditation practice now, and then maybe we can have a few questions at the end, or you can share some of your experience of dana as well. So if you'd like to just settle yourself a bit and make yourself comfortable. The act of meditation is also an act of dana for oneself and for others. Like when we practice metta meditation, we're doing it for ourselves and for others. For those we know, for those we don't know. So the very simple act of sitting down or walking, however you practice your meditation, if it's done with a good intention, with a pure intention, and done with the right effort, then it's also, it's also an act of dana. So as we begin our meditation practice, you might like to call to mind any dana that you've done in the last few weeks. And if it involved another person, who was that other person? And in what way did you practice dana with that person? And when it comes to giving, to being generous, what is it that you most like to give? What brings you happiness or contentment or peace within your own heart and mind, or joy within your own heart and mind when you give whatever this thing is? Remembering it doesn't have to be just some material object. And as we enter into our practice, maybe ask yourself, what's the thing that I find most difficult to give? You could rephrase that and say, what's the thing that I find most difficult to open my heart to? Let yourself settle now into your practice. Just having that gentle awareness of the body and the breath. As your meditation is an act of dana, you have to let go of grasping after anything. So you're not meditating in order to get something. You're not meditating in order to attain something. The Buddha himself says that the last thing one needs to let go of is the desire for nibbana itself. So just resting, having decided that you're going to do some practice, resting into your body, letting the breath help you settle into the body. Allowing the body and the breath to help the heart and mind to settle, to become more peaceful, more centered, to become calmer. And you use whatever method of practice that you're used to or that you normally use, whether it's the breath, the body, shikantaza, simply watching the movements of the heart and the mind. But just allow yourself, in a great act of generosity, to settle deeply within the heart and the mind. Like a diver descending into the depths of the ocean. Each breath helping you. The settling body helping you. Perhaps you can try to open your heart to your immediate experience. Not to how you want things to be, not to how things have been in the past, but just now, in this body, with this breath, this heart and mind, can I open myself to this? By practicing in this way, I protect myself from fear, the great enemy of practice, fearfulness. That's why we call that middle kind of dana abhaya dana, the fearlessness dana. The mudra of the Buddha with both hands raised, abhaya mudra. Nothing to fear here. So just allowing the heart to open, resting into the body and into the breath. Allowing whatever arises to arise and pass away. Not clinging, not pushing away. Letting the heart open. Practicing dana in this way, giving rise to great ease and great spaciousness within the body, heart, and mind. Resting into the body, resting into the breath, being very attentive to each moment. Notice if you are holding back in some way. Noticing if there's some resistance to surrendering into the practice itself with great dana, and trying to soften that and trying to loosen it, trying to let go of it. really allowing dana to grow and to develop, to open and to blossom within your own heart, within your own mind. And recognizing the presence then in real dana of loving kindness towards others, of compassion for others. The presence of the desire to be helpful, to be beneficial to others, as well as oneself. Just allowing yourself to enter more and more deeply into your practice. as you rest, cultivating dana within your own heart and mind. You might also consider how you receive dana. What kind of recipient are you? What does it mean to practice dana and to receive dana from others? Can you truly appreciate what you are given, the dana that you receive? Can you let your heart and mind be open to receive? And as we finish our little practice this evening, just call to mind people who have given you the gift of dana. Maybe your parents, maybe a sibling or siblings, maybe friends, maybe relatives, maybe complete strangers. You might like to call to mind instances where you've received dana from others. And maybe let some gratitude arise for that dana that you've received from others. Whether it's some kind of material dana or whether it's avya dana, the dana of fearlessness or protection or being taken care of, or the dana of Dhamma itself. And finally, perhaps acknowledging some gratitude toward yourself for all the effort that you've made to practice the Dhamma, to practice Dana, to practice loving kindness, to practice compassion. And then very gently let your eyes open, let yourself relax. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dhammaya, Namo Sanghaya. So if you'd like to ask questions, or better still, share your own experience of Dana, then please feel free. Just have a few minutes and then I'll hand back to Megan for various announcements and so on.
If I may ask, Bhante.
You go ahead, Frank.
In the library, a few weeks or months ago, we had a young American man from San Francisco. He was a clinical psychologist. And well, I don't have much education. And my English is, well, not learned in schools. So I had trouble understanding the Dhamma. He done his best. So on the end, I asked him, please forgive me if I ask a silly question. Let's suppose the Buddha was sitting next to me during this Dhamma talk. How much would he have understood tonight? And he looked at me, he was surprised, and the answer surprised me too. He said, well, the Buddha was teaching Nepalese farmers. That was the answer.
So, Frank, just tell me again, you said, what if who was sitting next to you?
If the Buddha was sitting next to me tonight, right, how much would he have understood from your Dhamma talk? Not yours, the gentleman's. And his answer was, well, the Buddha was teaching Nepalese farmers.
Well, it's pretty hard for me to say anything, Frank, because I wasn't there. I really don't know. But the idea that the Buddha might have been sitting next to you, the Buddha might have been sitting right in your own heart. During
the Buddha is usually there. He is in my heart for 50, 60 years now. But
Yeah. So, yeah,
But
I wouldn't worry. I mean, we can all go to Dhamma talks or hear Dhamma talks, and sometimes we think, oh, that was really wonderful and it's inspiring and all the rest of it. And then others we can go to and we think, oh my goodness, that was so boring, or I've got no idea what he or she was talking about, and so on. That's just part of human experience, isn't it? And the Buddha himself said, that people can hear the Dhamma, but not hear it. So you can, so to speak, you can use the words, but with some people they just don't penetrate, or it's not explained, as he said in that passage I read you at the beginning, carefully enough, slowly enough, step by step, out of compassion, and so on. So it's always the case. I know, to be perfectly honest, when I used to go to the Buddhist library to listen to talks, when we had visiting teachers and so on, and I'd make a point of going, but I soon made a point of sitting right at the back, and the reason was that I could leave if it became really, really boring. And it didn't happen very often, but it did happen sometimes. I would just very discreetly go down the stairs and disappear. It's inevitable that there are going to be Dhamma talks which we don't either understand, or which are not addressed clearly or properly. Look, in Thailand, when I was living with my teacher, you'll know that on the two important days, the two lunar days during the month, the monks all assemble and the lay people come to the board, and there's a sermon given, and or teaching, you say, given, and then the lay people feed the monks. And but during the sermon, the tradition in Thailand anyway, is that the monk will produce an ola leaf, a palm leaf text, the big one that you fold over and over and over that way.
Yes.
And they will have learnt off by heart a sermon that was given in the 19th century. And they will recite that sermon. And usually it's in a very high flying, the Thai, sometimes even in what's called Ratchasap, which is the royal Thai language, which is the language that monks use when they talk to each other.
Oh.
And so most of the lay people sitting there have no idea what's being said. And so they would sit very attentively, or occasionally they sneak outside and have a cigarette while it's going on. And they would leave and they'd feel that they'd been taught Dhamma. Well, the only Dhamma they'd been taught was patience. Patience and perseverance. So, it's important that we understand what's being taught, but we can't always understand it, and we can't always understand it at a particular point in time,
Yes.
So yeah, I wouldn't be worried at all about it, Frank. I'd just say, oh well, that was interesting. That was my experience then, and just leave it at that. I think as long as the teacher isn't harsh or cruel, in their response, well, that's their response.
Yeah, my feeling was that you must have a university degree to understand the teaching.
Oh, not at all. No, absolutely not. I mean, well, I'll tell you from my own experience with my my teacher. He didn't have a university degree, that's for sure. And when I rocked up to that monastery and ordained as a monk, he had a wonderful library, a very large library, and he had a lot of books in English, because he'd spent time in Sri Lanka before World War II, studying and learned English there. And so I began devouring those books. So day after day after day, I'd be going to his library and I'd be taking a handful of books out and I'd be reading them, and within a couple of days I'd be putting them back and getting more. And then one day he said to me, "Oh, now tomorrow, Mrs. So-and-so is coming, a lady that he knew who lived in Chiang Mai, but who was visiting relatives in Phuket. And he said, she's going to bring dana, that is the lunch dana. And he said, so I want you to make sure that you're here. Don't go with any of the other monks." So I said, okay. So we assembled in his kuti. This was in the old original monastery, which was way out of town where we were living. And when I went to his kuti, to the little sort of room in front of where he slept, they'd spread out a big mat, and he and I sat down, and these people arrived, and they put out the most enormous quantity of food. Like you would not believe. They could have fed 50 people with what they placed on the mat. And my teacher was tiny and very thin, and but he could really eat. He could really put the food away. And anyway, I stopped. I couldn't eat any more. And he said to me, "Oh, no, have some more." And then he would move dishes around and say, "Have some of this. This is really good. Try this one," and so on. And in the end, I felt that I'd eaten so much, I felt almost sick.
Oh.
And then the people left. They paid the respects. We did the blessing. They left. They went downstairs again. And he got up to leave, and I felt like I could barely move. I'd eaten so much. And he laughed, and he said to me, "You know, Tejadhammo, books and food have a lot in common." So, you know, in other words, stop reading all those books, you know, and do something else, do something useful. So it's not book learning that's important by any means, you know, university or no university. It's what we do in terms of practice, you know.
Yes.
That's what's important, you know. The Buddha didn't require or didn't check anybody's university qualifications.
Yes. Yeah, I think that was the meaning behind his words.
Yeah.
That the Buddha just taught simple farmers. You know, in this age, we teach very high university degree. You know.
Oh yeah, but the Buddha also taught you know, kings
Kings.
and princes and all sorts of other people.
Yes.
Yeah, I just think that we can go too far with the idea of book knowledge, and it can actually become an obstacle. It can become a block, and also it can become a way of masking oneself. You know, of kind of putting up a barrier between oneself and others if you're not careful.
Yes.
So yeah, you know, I don't know, Frank.
Just one more thing. I learned a great deal from Aya Kema, and she said, "You do not live by what you know, you live by what you feel."
Yeah.
Feelings dictate us, not the knowledge, what we know. And one day in the Buddhist library, I forgot where I was, and I remember this Japanese teacher, monk, who said in England, giving advice, he said, "Books, books, books, dustbin, dustbin, dustbin." And I looked around the girls there, and I was in the library. It wasn't the right place to say that, quoting that Japanese monk. Books, 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 dustbin, dustbin, dustbin.
Yeah. Well, of course, you could make a nice retort to that, and then ask him how he learnt that, and I bet you he didn't. He learned it from some books.
No.
So it's a question of being balanced, isn't it? You know, of balancing, you know, your reading, your study, your attending Dhamma talks, you know, because you don't want to be a person who's forever going to Dhamma talks either.
Yes.
Because that's just more collecting. You may as well collect stamps, you know, as just go to endless Dhamma talks, because unless they have a transformative effect on you, there's no point. You know, because you'll come to the time when death is waiting for you,
Exactly.
And Death's not going to say to you, how many good books have you read any good books? You know, I love
Nice of you to say so, but tomorrow I'm going to be 81.
Are you a happy birthday, Frank?
Yes, thank you very much.
Oh,
Thank you, Bhante.
good. All right.
Thanks for coming back, and thanks for the talk.
Thank you. I'll hand back to Megan now. And thank you, everybody, for being so patient. Sorry, Megan, away you go.
Thank you, Bhante. And thank you for such a lovely talk. And there were so many things in there that are very timely for now. For instance, you were talking about Pauline and her beautiful dana that she offered to Sangha Lodge, and I know that tomorrow is her funeral, so I'm sure we'll all be sparing a thought for her and remembering that lovely dana that she offered to all of us as a community by bringing those flowers every month for Dana Day. And you also mentioned about the Asylum Seekers Centre. So it's a good time to just let everybody know that Alex and other members of our community have offered to prepare and provide lunch for people at the Asylum Seeker Centre once a month on a Friday. So that's, again, another lovely example of dana that's happening right here within our community. And if you would like to contribute in some way, if you'd like to contribute materially, you could go to the website and there's information about how to donate money that can go directly to helping to feed people at the Asylum Seeker Centre.
Megan, if they've got time, they could go and help.
Yes, absolutely. If you have time, get in touch with us and we will let you know how you can do that. We've got a couple of retreats coming up, and we've just had a lovely 4-day retreat with Kynan over the Australia Day holiday. I don't like to say Australia Day, the 26th of January to the 29th. That was very successful. So thank you, Kynan, for all of your hard work, and a very big thank you to Ming, who cooked delicious food for everyone. And that was a lovely opportunity for people to get back down to Wajasala, to the recently completed renovations. And I know some of you joined us for the open day in December. So it's really lovely to know that Wajasala is now such a beautiful place, an even more beautiful place and practical place for us to practice. Kynan's doing another retreat at the end from the 21st of April to the 30th of April, and that will be a 10-day silent meditation retreat. If anyone's interested in that, again, you can go to the website or make contact and we'll give you some more information about that. Bhante Akaliko is offering a 4-day, 5-day, I think, retreat over the Easter weekend. And we're also going back to the idea that was started, I think, last year, where we will offer a weekend for people who would like to come down to Wajasala and do some practice. It will be quite an informal opportunity, so not a strict retreat as such, but it will be an opportunity to practice. So I I think that's all I've got to say. Is there anything that anyone else would like to say just in completion before we finish off for the evening?
Okay, that's
No?
good.
Okay.
Anyone? Sleep well.
Thank you very much, Bhante.
Bye-bye.
And
night.
bye to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you
Thank you.
next
Good
week.
night.
Good night. Thanks.